Good afternoon and welcome to our October session of the Voice of a CDFA. Today I am joined by Diane Pappas. Diane is the owner and principal of Solutions for Divorce. She was a member of the IDFA Board of Advisors and also a former chair of our Board of Advisors. She is a CDFA who has experience in a multitude of different styles. She has worked in collaborative practice. She has worked in litigation support. She's worked as an expert witness. Today, she's going to talk to us a bit about her work both in mediation and most recently as a mediator. Diane is also the first recipient of the IDFA Lifetime Achievement Award, and also today is another first. This is the first time we've had a repeat visitor on our podcast, but Diane has such a varied background, we couldn't cover near all of her accomplishments in just one meeting. She also is a certified quadro specialist, and I believe that was the focus of our first podcast with her. So if you're interested in that, find that podcast. I'm sure you'll find it worthwhile. Diane was just telling me a little bit about her work as a mediator, and I was really interested in how you came to become not a CDFA functioning as a financial neutral in mediation, but actually take your first case as a mediator. So could you tell me that story again?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me back. I enjoy being here. Thank you very much, Carolee. So it was, I think in 2020, during COVID, I got a case referred to me for a client couple. One was a very successful eye surgeon and his wife was a pediatrician. So they had a lot of money, a lot of assets, and they could not resolve the case in litigation. And so somebody who knew me, knew what I did as a CDFA, said, why don't you give Diana, see what happens, give Diane a call. So I worked with the couple. I took them on as a CDFA and just went through what I normally do, is going through all their financials, gathering all the information. And then once I got all that, we reviewed the property statement, cash flow, child support, alimony. I think they had grown kids, so there was no child support. So there was a lot going on. The reason why they came to me is because they had been in litigation for almost a year or more and had spent over $100,000. And I'm sure a lot of you hear that story over and over again because it does happen. And for what did they have to show? $100,000, nothing. And after I worked with them, got all the information needed, I resolved that case in 6 weeks. So we got to a separation agreement. I made like an MOU at that point, put it all together, and we had an attorney, one of the attorneys that they were still working with, and then they brought in another more mediator-friendly attorney to help draft the agreement. And everything worked. They got divorced, no problems. So I said to myself, that's really interesting. I basically just mediated that case. I had already taken a mediation training, a 40-hour training back in 2012. But I hadn't really followed through with it because I took it more to understand how to communicate with people, how to just listen to people, because you have to do that when you're a CDFA. So, but then I realized, you know what? I really think this is a very good way to use the skills as a CDFA to help people in mediation. And the rest is history. I've just been now, I was 100% CDFA. Now I'd have to say that I am 70% mediation, 20, I don't know, we're somewhere between I do a lot of quadros now, and I just seem to be doing more of that than I am as a CDFA on litigated cases. I get little one-offs, Bacanti analysis, stuff with stock options. But the big work right now is mediation.
And you were talking to me the different types of sessions you have within a mediation, the differences between a couple who's divorcing who has no children versus a couple with kids. Could you share a little of that with our audience, what the different sessions in a mediation might be?
Sure. So, a lot of people who are CDFAs might not have experience with putting together parenting plans or discussing children. And that my first case was a little like, I was like, didn't really know what to do, but it comes naturally. So not only do I cover the financial issues, but we also talk about parenting plans and, ensure all the costs, the extracurricular costs, child support. I go into all of that. And it really just, comes, it's second nature when you just start talking about it. I was a mom myself who went through a divorce, so I kind of know what happens with kids when, you're going through the process. So those cases take a little longer. Definitely say that when there's kids involved, there's probably 1 or 2 extra meetings to talk about the kids. And we want to talk about the kids first before we tackle the financial stuff, because it's really important to keep the focus on the family, on the kids first, and then talk about the finances. So those meetings, I found that I can get them done in 4 to 5 meetings. My meetings are 2 hours each, sometimes more, sometimes less, but most people can't handle more than 2 hours. And by the 3rd or 4th meeting, I start writing an MOU, my memorandum of understanding, which we then, at the end of that, once that gets done, we bring in mediator-friendly attorneys that I work with. So I'd say, average meetings 4 to 5. It's really hard to tell. If I have young people, I've got a lot of people that got married in COVID 2020, no kids, and they just want to get divorced. So a marriage less than 5 years, I've had 2 meetings and I'm already starting the MOU because, again, not a lot there, but they were, they needed someone to help them because they really didn't know how to have some of these conversations. So I'll be ready to give them an MOU at the 3rd meeting. So that's, I just really find that once you have the financial information, which I gather up front, the meetings are really efficient. And that's another thing. I just had another client call me and say, oh, we've been with this mediator for over a year. And I said, okay. And they're like, well, we're not getting anywhere. And she started talking to me. I said, oh, do you have anything in writing? She's like, no. I'm like, okay, so wait, you've been in mediation for a year, but there's nothing in writing. So that's why they came to me.
Well, so when you're working as a mediator and you're not advocating one solution over the other or one party over the other, you're just actually providing factual information to both couples. Do you find that that tends to just being able to give them that information and go through and make sure both parties fully understand where they are does a lot to reduce the temperature?
Definitely. There is no doubt about it that when you come from principled negotiation, as opposed to positional bargaining, which is litigation,
Right.
you're going to have a much easier chance of having the clients understand what they're doing. So like you just said, having clarity. A lot of the clients up here, we have big tech. So we have a lot of stock options, restricted stock units, executive compensation. We've got other kinds of pension plans, non-qualified plans. A lot of times they don't understand what they are. So if you don't understand what these things are or how you're going to divide them, how can you possibly negotiate anything? So I do take the time to educate my clients so they know exactly what their options are. I even have to go through the options for the home. People don't know that you can keep a home, at least in Massachusetts, we do, to jointly own a home after divorce. It's possible. People don't even know that. So once they understand what their options are, I illustrate all those, using family law software. I will, go make sure that both parties understand how RSUs work and what happens when they vest and all this other stuff and how you divide them afterwards. I go through, we have a lot of state pensions. So I go through how we typically divide a state pension, the benefit. And so just when people have that information, you can just see them working, in their heads going, oh, okay, so this is how we do it. And they, obviously they had no clue, but now they're informed and I'm just amazed. I mean, maybe I've had really good clients. I don't know, but I've had some tough ones. I've had to fire 1 or 2, but I'm pretty amazed at how using the financial information really helps resolve the case.
More like decades ago, talking to Carol Ann Wilson, the original founder of IDFA, and her talking about the number of women clients she worked with who were just convinced, really, in the face of everything factual, that if they were divorced, if they went through the divorce, they'd become bag ladies. And her talking about how the one thing she was bringing to the entire process was really just solid education and information for those parties involved.
Yep, no, I agree. Unfortunately, women, it has to do with the traditional roles. I mean, there's the men work and the women are home. I mean, that's typical. Not, I see those changing, obviously, but those traditional roles play a huge part in divorce because the husband, father, typically manages the money. A lot of times they may control it, which leaves the other spouse to feel like they have no power, that that they don't even have access to the information. So now trying to go through a divorce, they're completely overwhelmed. They have no clue what's going on. They don't know where to start. And then that's when I get the phone call. A lot of times I get that as a CDFA. I get that phone call from women and it's just they need not that they're smart. That's not the problem. It's just that they don't have access to it. And they're maybe not they're home with the kids, they're not working. And so they just need some more information. And you're exactly right. You have to level the playing field.
Right. Well, and over the years, I mean, I have seen, of course, the same changes everyone is seeing. The fact that, more than likely most households have both parents working to some extent, but they're still in almost any relationship is one person who handles the finances, is in charge of the finances, and not necessarily to the detriment of the other, just that's the way, some people are good at cooking, some people are good at, people are good at different things, and trying to make sure that even though one party may be handling the finances, that both parties are adequately educated as to what their financial situation is. I think that type of education is one of the very best things a CDFA can do for a couple.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, which is why, I love my work as a CDFA. But I have to tell you is that it can be really frustrating when you're in a litigated case. As a CDFA, I'm doing the right thing. I know that. But it's the opposing counsel that just will not listen to anything. They've got, like I said, that positional bargaining. They are stuck on this one thing. And, I can go into the whole thing. It's dissipation of an IRA that just the husband took $400,000 out and they're like, oh, no, that's not dissipation of assets. And I can't get anyone to like listen to me. So that's really frustrating, to be a CDFA, to know you're doing the right thing and you're not being heard. So that's kind of why, mediation is nice because I don't have that pushback. And of course, I'm not telling people what to do. I'm not telling them what they have to do or anything like that. I'm giving them the information. I am also providing them with the legal information. Obviously, not allowed to give legal advice. You can give legal information. So we go over the rules in Massachusetts, the guidelines, the case law. I give them the child support guidelines. I give them the Massachusetts general laws, the sections about alimony and everything. We go over it in the mediation. So they're both hearing it. So they can look that up themselves. So that's the legal information that's the standard we fall back on when they're making their decisions. They'll say, well, what typically happens? And I say, well, and as a mediator, you're allowed to say, well, based on my experience, a judge might do this, or I've seen people do that, or they've handled it this way. So you're allowed to do that.
Right. Provide them guidelines.
Yep, guidelines.
Is there any type of couple or type of situation where you would think mediation would just be a non-starter?
Yes. When someone in your first meeting tells you what they want and you realize from the second meeting, they're not changing that position. Can't mediate when someone is stuck in somewhere and they won't,
Yeah, it's hard to negotiate when one party won't play.
they won't play. As I tell them, look, this case mediation is successful if you're able to negotiate and you're able to have these conversations. If you can't, or you're stuck in a position because you're mad or you're angry, it's not going to work. And that's the one couple that I said, I'm sorry, we're not getting anywhere. This isn't going to work because the one person just would not budge. And I was like, okay, well, okay, but I can't, there's nothing I can do. So that's a difficult one. There's, you always have one party that's skeptical about the whole process. And they think that because the wife called me first, that I'm going to be biased and, they don't really know what to do with me. But then once they start hearing how I talk and how I come from a neutral place, that I'm a neutral facilitator, they say, oh, okay, yeah. And I'm showing them like I'm verifying their assets. And they're like, yep, those are our assets. She can't be biased with that because the numbers don't lie. It can be challenging in the beginning with someone like that that's not 100% bought into the process. But once they see how things are going to go and they begin to trust you, then it works. But mediation is not 100% successful. And I always tell my clients, look, there might be one or two issues we can't resolve, right? A lot of times it's alimony, because that's a legal issue with huge financial ramifications. So I say, you know what, if we can do everything else and that's the last thing, that's fine. It doesn't mean mediation failed. It just means let's bring in the mediator friendly attorneys now and let's have a 5-way meeting and let's resolve it.
It has to be better for all concerned, the more issues they can resolve themselves rather than having orders imposed upon them. It's so much easier to abide by an agreement you came to rather than one that was forced upon you.
Right. Well, there's proven statistics about that. Those parties that help to draft their own, agreements, or, they've been major players in it. They're the ones that are doing it. They took back the control in their divorce rather than a judge or the attorneys. Those agreements are usually going to be a lot more successful because, like you say, they've got skin in the game and they came to that conclusion based on the information and they had clarity when they signed that agreement, which they don't always have in litigation.
Right. So for the clients that you're helping as a mediator, are you also able to help them with any quadros that need to be developed because of the mediation?
Yes, I do. So it's kind of like, oh, you can kill multiple birds with one stone with me. Yeah, so, a 401k needs dividing. So I do the quadro. Again, I'm just drafting a document that is based on their agreements. So, my quadro has to match what the separation agreement says. So normally, like, I'll tell the clients, we have a pension, we have a 401k, whatever. When they bring in the attorneys I work with know that I'm going to do the quadro. I send them a draft. Everybody gets a draft. So, it's not like I'm going to skew it one way or the other. It's a quadro. We send it to the plan administrator for pre-approval, blah, blah, blah. It gets, and the thing about when I do it is that I don't make any mistakes because I know what the parties agreed to. There's
Right.
no misinterpretation. There's no misunderstanding of how that account's going to be divided. We work together to do it. So.
And before we wrap this up, there was one more thing that you said that I found very interesting. And you were talking about the fact that post-pandemic, we have all gotten so used to meeting one another or having meetings virtually or through Zoom. Can you talk a little bit about how you run your mediation sessions?
Yes, I am 100% virtual. So I do it all on Zoom. And I've only had one person out of the last 4 years say, oh, no, I don't want to do that. They wanted to be in person. But all my other cases, they've been fine with it. I actually think it's really better because you're in your safe space. You're in your little square here. You're not sitting next to the table to the person you want to, be done with. It's the people, they're a lot more calm, because they're not stressed out. Yes, they see their spouse just like I see you, obviously, but I find that the dynamic is really good. Yes, I let people go at it a little bit. There may be a little bit of crying, but I let them just go on a little bit, and then I stop them. But when I was doing in-person work as a CDFA, I just found there was a lot of tension in the air sitting at a table across from two people 2 feet apart from each other.
Right.
There's a lot of tension. And this on Zoom, I just think the conversations are a lot easier to have. We've had some tough conversations and it's okay. It works for me. I mean, I can't speak for everybody else. I have talked to some other mediators here in Massachusetts. They're all virtual too. They feel the same way I do about it. It works.
I want to thank you for taking time to share with us the new developments in your practice and your shift towards functioning as a mediator and how you feel that's worthwhile. And one of the things I think is so helpful about these types of discussions is that we get away from the idea that a CDFA does this and only this, and we start to explore all the different ways CDFAs can work to
Mhm.
help bring down the temperature in divorce and come to solutions that are the best possible outcome for both parties involved. So thank you again for your time today, Diane. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Carol. That was well put too at the end there.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.